Hello, everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to the Gender Libertarian Podcast. If you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, and Libertarian Institute. So I'm taking a break from the current insane news cycle to try to catch up on a lot of the immigration news that's been happening because I haven't discussed it in a while. And that's not to say that there's been nothing going on. There's been quite a lot going on. So I want to go ahead and kind of back up to about a month ago because I've got about a month's worth of notes here to make it through. A lot of things happened while I was kind of on my little break, and then there's been plenty of other things happening that's just been drowned out of the news cycle by all of the other current insanity that is going on. So let's go ahead and kind of wind it back and kind of hit some of the topics that flew under the radar a little bit. So the first thing is that the Trump administration is proposing a plan to eliminate the 30-day processing rule for work permits for asylum seekers. Now, there is already a wait period before you can apply for a work permit if you're an asylum seeker or if you're any other kind of person who is here legally. And yes, if you are in the asylum process, you're here legally. But a thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is just because you are here legally does not necessarily mean that you can work here legally. There's various sorts of visas one can have that do not allow for you to work. Obviously, coming here as an asylum seeker or a refugee, you do still have to apply for a work permit, even if you are accepted into one of those programs, which we'll talk more about that a little later. But once you make it through your wait period, which they were flirting with actually taking that up to a year wait before you could even apply for a work permit. Once you apply, as it stands, the government has 30 days to get back to you to say yay or nay or whether you can have a work permit. They want to get rid of that 30-day processing rule, which means God only knows how long it would take for somebody to get a work permit to be able to work legally in the United States. So I think everybody can figure out exactly what that's going to lead to, because if you are here, obviously, you need to make money. You have to have a job. You have to pay for housing and food and clothing and all the things that one has to pay for when they live in the United States. So that's just going to force people to work illegally. And it's just, what? Like, I say it all the time, but the cruelty is the point, obviously, because all this is going to do is create a black market for people who are here legally but can't work legally but have to work because you need money to survive. And it's another blow to the whole idea that this administration supports legal immigration, which it absolutely does not. And it's been made pretty abundantly clear over the past month's worth of news that this has never been an attack on just illegal immigration or people coming to the southern border. This administration wants to shut down immigration, period, unless you are a very, very, very specific type of immigrant or potential immigrant. So that is something I'm not quite sure what is going to come of that, but it's another one of those things where you're trying to screw over people who are trying to, quote unquote, do it legally and forcing them into doing things that they would happily do legally, but you're not giving them an avenue to do it legally, so they're going to do it illegally because you have to work. Everybody has to have a job. Either that or you try to figure out a way to go on government assistance, which is also illegal, but here we are. And if you force somebody into a situation where they have to do something illegally, they're going to do it illegally. Anyway, moving on to our Asylum Ban 2.0, which this one, this is the rough one. So, back on September 9th, and I've discussed this before about how it was originally ruled that the Ninth Circuit said that the Trump administration couldn't force people into having to apply for asylum at another country that they came through before applying here. And then it was decided that that ruling could only apply to states within the Ninth Circuit. And then after that, on September 9th, that was overturned, and it was decided that the ban would be nationwide. And then the Supreme Court upheld the ban while litigation proceeds against the asylum ban. So, as it stands right now, the legal, whatever you want to call it, because I don't even see how this is legal, because it's unilaterally forcing, well, at this point, one country to do something that it does not want to do. But you're forcing other countries to have to accept asylum seekers, even if they don't want to. And you're forcing people to have to do something that, per the INA, per the law that Congress passed, if somebody presents at the U.S. border and asks for asylum, you are to put them in the asylum proceedings. It's not, did you apply over here? Did you go through here? Did you do this? Did you do that? Wait over here at this port. That's not how the law is written. So, once again, it's the administration trying to circumvent written law in order to shut down any kind of immigration coming in through the southern border. It's just really shitty. That's really bad. And actually, you know who it screws over even worse? Are the people who did try to play by the rules and were waiting at the ports of entry, who were on the list. Now all of a sudden, those people are screwed because now they're not eligible. It's not, it applies to them too. It's not like they get grandfathered in. Basically, anybody who was here, or, well, not here, but there, when the asylum ban 2.0 went back into effect, they're screwed. And so, again, you create this situation where you're asking people to play by the rules, but if you keep changing the rules, and then if the people that do play by the rules get screwed over because they played by the rules, guess what's going to happen? People are going to stop playing by the rules, and they're going to start coming over here in whatever way that they can, which is often very dangerous. It's either trying to cross the Rio Grande, or you're paying coyotes to try to smuggle you over here. Either way, or you try to do it on foot by yourself or with a small crowd of people. Either way, it's incredibly dangerous. It's not a safe way to do this. But if you shut down every other avenue, that's what people are going to do. And so you're going to end up having more people dying trying to get into this country to do the thing that, legally speaking, they have every right to do. But this administration, for some reason, has a bizarre hard-on for keeping brown people out of the country. I don't get it, but you're not, this is just not the way to go about it. Even if you don't agree with immigration and you feel differently about the border than I do, circumventing written law, the executive branch circumventing the legislative branch, is not the way to go about it. It is not a thing that anybody should be supporting. I wish Congress would get off their ass and do something about it, but waiting for Congress to get off their ass and do something about anything right now is just like, that's a fool's errand, honestly. But yeah, and that's why I talk about this so much, and that's why I emphasize this, is no matter how you may happen to feel about immigration, the way this administration is going about it is illegal. Like, it should not be. Like, the executive branch should not be constantly doing end runs around Congress to do whatever the fuck it is they want to do, and Congress should sit there like, oh, well, okay, I guess. Like, that's not how this is supposed to work, and it's not a thing that anybody who cares about separation of powers or limited government or the Constitution should be supporting at all. Anyway, moving on. 2 more things that are probably not constitutional. The port courts are now in effect. And what the port courts are is they're tents. I mean, there's no other way to put this. They're tent courts, if you want to call them that are set up on the border right outside the ports of entry for those who are in Mexico under the migrant protection protocols. They're having their court dates in these port courts, and how it is set up is this. Basically, you get your date, hopefully, maybe, and that's a whole nother ball of wax, is how these people are supposed to even handle the logistics of showing up for a court date. But say you show up for your court date, you actually get your court date, you show up. What it is you go in and the judge is not present in the port court. The judge is wherever their physical court happens to be, and they're basically like Skyping in. And there were some questions initially as to whether one's lawyer, if one was lucky enough to have one, would be allowed to be in the port court, or if they would have to be in the physical court where the judge is. And as it stands right now, they are allowing lawyers into the port courts with their clients in order to have their asylum hearings, to do what lawyers do, which is to assist you and guide you through the legal process. But the judge is somewhere else. And so it sets up this very dystopian sort of thing where you've got basically, well, what is supposed to be kind of mass hearings, which they're not turning into mass hearings because people are not showing up, which, again, this goes to, did these people actually get their court dates? Can they physically get there? Because they're busing these people in Mexico here, there, and everywhere, so it may not even be logistically possible for you to show up for your court date. And so when you don't have a lawyer, which the vast, vast, vast majority of these people do not have lawyers, when you're in the immigration process, it's not like being in the criminal justice process where you are assigned a lawyer if you cannot afford one. If you can't get a lawyer on your own in the immigration court system, you're on your own. And for obvious reasons, if one is being held in Mexico, it's a little difficult to find a lawyer stateside. And then even if you do, then you have the logistics of how do you communicate with your lawyer? How do you get your lawyer the information that they need in order to prepare your asylum paperwork and to prepare your case? Because it is, applying for asylum, it's not like going to the DMV and you just like go there, fill out a couple of forms and whoosh, you're in. It is an actual court case, and you do have to provide documentation. You do have to be able to talk to your lawyer, preferably in a secure private area, because you're going to have to tell your lawyer why it is you're fleeing your home country and why it is that you think that you should be eligible for asylum, which often means telling some very personal, intimate stories, things that you probably don't want to say in public or even like a semi-public area. Like, this isn't a conversation you want to be trying to have in, like, in an internet cafe or on a payphone or somewhere where other people can hear you, which that actually leads to another problem that's popping up in Mexico with those who are there under the migrant protection protocols, is the cartels have moved in. And so we're starting to get stories of people being kidnapped and tortured and raped and disappeared and held for ransom so that their families back home will give them money. Like, it's such a bad situation. And it's one where the cartels are starting to target those who are there under migrant protection protocol because it's obvious that they're not natives. And so once you know that there are people looking for you and looking at you, you're not really going to want to divulge too much information someplace where somebody could overhear you. And it's also a situation, especially if you are fleeing gang violence in your home country, if word gets back that, okay, this person is over here now, you're not safe. Like, now the people that want to kill you know where you're at. So it's the whole migrant protection protocol thing. It's turned into such a clusterfuck, and it's so dangerous for these people. And it's something that the press is now finally starting to cover, which I understand. It takes a long time to write these stories. It takes time and money to send people down to these places and do interviews and get these big pieces together and get them out there, but they're finally starting to get out there. So I think awareness of what is going on down at the border with migrant protection protocol, hopefully also with the port courts, will start to get more press, and more people will start to understand that what you see here stateside with CPB and ICE is kind of like the tip of the iceberg. And then there's a whole nother section that, because it's below the border, it's down in Mexico, you don't see it. But, I mean, last count, there is roughly 40,000 people in Mexico right now under migrant protection protocols waiting for their day, not even in court, but to present to a port of entry. And something that I had actually wondered about is what would happen to those who were under migrant protection protocol, presented, passed their credible fear interview. What's happening is those people are not being allowed into the United States. They're being sent back to Mexico, which then you could end up being stuck in Mexico for years. Like, there's really no rhyme or reason as to how long this case may take for you, especially if you do have a lawyer. I mean, it's such an insane situation. And it's one that a lot of people don't talk about. And that's why I talk about it. So anyway, moving on from that, which I'm sure, hopefully, there will be a lot more attention being paid to what is going on down in Mexico in that situation. So what did end up happening? And this kind of, it doesn't negate the asylum ban, but I think it's kind of a stopgap in case the courts do overturn it. And that is that now, in addition to Guatemala, we have signed some agreement with both El Salvador and Honduras to do what exactly nobody seems to know yet, because the details of implementation on all three of these deals is very, very sketchy, even still on the Guatemala deal, because their parliament hasn't approved it. But there is sort to be some sorts of deals in place with these countries to accept asylum seekers and be safe third countries, although these aren't safe third country agreements. I use that term because it's the one that most people can immediately understand, but they're not official safe third country agreements. But what they are is kind of this idea that if somebody passes through one of these three countries, which, unless you are seeking asylum from Mexico, you're Mexican and you're seeking asylum in the United States, you've probably gone through one of these three countries, that you have to apply for asylum in that country. Here's the problem. In Guatemala, there are 9 people who work in the asylum office. In Honduras, there is one person who works in the asylum office. Would somebody like to explain to me how in the ever-loving fuck are they going to process asylum applications? Especially in the kind of numbers that the U.S. is going to be expecting them to? And not to mention, all three of those countries, all three of those Northern Triangle countries are, first off, the countries that people are trying to flee, which automatically means they're probably not super fucking safe places to be. And these three countries rank in the top 10 for murder per capita. Like, these are countries that beat out war zones for the amount of deaths. Not safe places to be. Not at all. It's just... And I don't know why these countries are signing these deals. I am very curious to know why. I am very interested in seeing if the other shoe is going to drop and find out that we are either giving them money or there is some other sort of compensation that is going to come along with these countries signing these deals. I don't see them doing it for no damn good reason, because God knows there is no good reason for them to be signing these agreements. Like, it's going to screw them over so much. I don't understand it. And it's also just, like I said, these are not safe places to be. These are the places that these people are fleeing, and forcing people to stay someplace that is not a safe place to be is just like, you're missing the whole freaking point of asylum. The whole point of asylum is for people to leave the shitty places and go someplace that is not shitty. It's not force the people to stay in shitty country B because they want to leave shitty country A. Like, this isn't hard. Why? There's so much about immigration policy right now that's just, why? Like, there's so many other ways this could all be handled. It's a totally fabricated crisis by one person. And I wish Congress would get their act together and do something about it. But like I said, that's wishing for something that's never going to happen. So as it stands right now, you cannot really present at the U.S. border anymore and apply for asylum. There is a way to do it, and here's how you do it. What you would have to do, and I'm not quite sure, again, with those safe third country deals, implementation is still very, very much up in the air. But with the asylum ban, what you would have to do is you would have to get in front of a CPB officer, which that's a whole nother thing. CPB officers are now doing credible/reasonable fear interviews, which they are not qualified to do. They are not trained to do. So, and obviously there's immense pressure on them to decide these cases in a certain way. So, again, this is just so, it's Kafkaesque. But what you do is you have to go there and you have to meet a reasonable fear standard. And you have to meet a reasonable fear standard, which is higher than credible, that you have a very, very good reason to not only not want to go back to your home country, but to not stay in Mexico either. So, where these people in MPP are being kept are some of the most dangerous places in the world, let alone Mexico. And there have been cases where people have shown up and presented to CPB with actual open bleeding stab wounds, and they've been turned away. There's been women who have showed up in labor and have been turned away. There are people that have shown up very, very sick, and by the protocols set up by MPB, you're not supposed to be in the program if you are somebody who is in a particularly delicate situation. Like if you are a pregnant woman, if you're about to give birth, then you're not supposed to be there. If you are somebody who faces persecution because you are gay or transgender, you're not supposed to be there. If you are somebody who is very sick or injured, you're not supposed to be there. But these people are getting shoved back down into Mexico against protocol because of course we are. Because we can't let any of these people in, apparently. It's such a humanitarian crisis too, and it's such a human rights violation. I don't understand why. Where are you at, UN? Where are you at on this? I thought you guys were all about this. But moving on from the very confusing safe third country-ish deals to our new refugee cap. This one also hurts because fiscal year 2020, which we are, I guess, technically, well, yeah, we are technically in it now. For this fiscal year, the Trump administration has decided to lower the refugee cap from last fiscal year, it was 30,000, which is still a ridiculously small number. They dropped it down to 18,000. 18,000 refugees, it's capped. We're in the middle of a worldwide refugee crisis, and this country, the country that was founded on taking in refugees, the country that has held itself out as the shining beacon of hope for refugees, just capped the amount of refugees we will take in this next year at 18,000 people. What the ever-loving fuck is going on here? And the second problem with this, aside from the obvious humanitarian problem, is this exacerbates the problem with the asylum program. Because we are not letting people into the refugee program who, by rights, should probably be in it, now that's causing this overflooding in the asylum system because it's the only other way they have. And this is you're starting to see this reported on more. It's something that I've known about for a while, but especially down at the border, a lot of the people who are in migrant protection protocols are Northern Triangle people. You do have some Mexicans. You have a lot of Cubans. You have a lot of Venezuelans. You're starting to have a lot of Syrians, a lot of people coming from the Middle East, a lot of people coming from Africa, people who should, by rights, be in a refugee track, but they can't get into the refugee track because we've capped it so low. So it creates this massive problem. And it's like, there are days when I wonder if it is stupidity or cruelty. And usually at this point, I come down on the side of cruelty because I don't understand how you can make so many decisions that have obvious negative repercussions to what your stated goal is. That, I mean, it has to be on purpose. Like, I don't, like, how could you possibly think that capping the refugee allowance that low would do anything to help the current situation at the southern border? It's only going to exacerbate it. Like, anybody with any sense can figure that out. So, at this point, I would have to assume that the cruelty is the point. But moving on to a little bit of good news. There's a little tiny little bit of good immigration news I have. And that is that the changes that the administration was seeking to have to the Flores amendments, which is the set of rules that govern how you detain minor immigrants, minor asylum seekers when they come into the country. And what the Trump administration was wanting to do was they were wanting to alter or abolish, depending on how you want to look at it, the rule that says that you could only keep children in custody for 20 days in order to detain them indefinitely under the idea that, okay, we'll keep families together by just putting the whole damn family in detention. And yeah, the courts were like, no, you don't get to do an end run around established precedent like that, which is a little bit of good news. And of course, always the response to it is, well, otherwise it's family separation. It's like, no, it's not. There are other ways to handle this. And you cannot keep children in detention indefinitely, especially when you can't charge them with a crime. I mean, first, you shouldn't be able to keep anybody in detention indefinitely, which that I even have to explain that. It shows how absolutely insane immigration has gotten in this country. But no, you can't just hold children in detention indefinitely. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, what? You're going to keep them there for what, years? And you're going to do what exactly to provide for education, for just being able, you're going to ask them, like, grow up in detention? Like, no, that's not how this works. So, fortunately, that idea got struck down by the courts. What new and ingenious, horrible way they will come up with to torture people in spite of that, I'm sure there will be something. I have no doubt that Stephen Miller will come up with some new way to screw with people, but there's that. And then the second bit of good news is the courts did file and accept the injunction to block expedited removal. Now, what expedited removal was going to be was basically ICE being judge, jury, and executioner. Basically saying that if ICE picks you up and you cannot produce on the spot proof that you are here legally, then they could automatically put you into deportation proceedings, take you into custody, send you to wherever the hell they think you're supposed to go with no due process, no court date, no nothing. So that has been blocked. Again, I'm sure they will come up with some new and exciting way to fuck with people, but at least completely crapping on people's due process rights got blocked by the courts. That's where we're at, people. Having to have courts explain to the administration, to ICE, to CPB, basic, fundamental, constitutional bedrock principles. Yes, they apply to everybody in the United States, not just citizens And yes, they also apply to the brown people that you want to round up and ship God knows where. So, moving on to the more recent stories. And this is one that definitely got a lot of traction. And that is, I guess it's an excerpt from a book that's coming out on immigration policy in the Trump era. But there was an excerpt. I believe it was originally posted in the New York Times. And of course, everybody's picked it up. But there were sources inside the White House who said that Trump had said, intimated, made moves towards, actually, I think there was actually a cost estimate drawn up on this, on the idea of there being a moat dug along the southern border with alligators in it, and that he wanted to make our fence electric with flesh-piercing spikes on the top. Now, this all sounds insane, yes, but when you have followed immigration in this administration, it's pretty goddamn feasible that that man said that. And when you look at the actual plans for the slats that are supposed to be going on at the border, the tops are pointed. Like, they have pointy tops. That's the design plan. And the worst one, and to the best of my knowledge, Trump has not really denied this one. And this is a hell of a lot less funny, but he floated the idea that migrants who show up and try to cross the border should be able to be shot, like shot to death, or anybody who throws rocks at CPB should be shot to death. And when he was told, yeah, you can't really do that, that's not legal, he suggested, well, why don't we just shoot him in the leg and slow him down? Which, excuse me, what? You want to do what? Hey, first of all, the sheer logistics of shooting people in the leg while they are moving, I don't think most of the people at CPB are that good of a shot. Second of all, you can still shoot somebody in the leg and kill them. Third off, don't shoot anybody in the leg or anywhere else for trying to exercise their legal right to apply for asylum in the United States. Don't shoot anybody. Don't make them swim through an alligator moat. Don't electrify the damn fence. But it's just like, it's so insane that you can hear something like that and be like, yep, that sounds 1000% plausible. Like, that is something that came out of that man's mouth. And for what it's worth, even Fox News was able to verify with people inside the White House that, yes, those things were said. Like, yes, he did say that. So even Fox News has reported that, yeah, we have it on good authority that he did actually say those things. So yeah, and a lot of people had fun with it, and I get it. Like, okay, on some level, yes, go ahead, make your Austin Power jokes, make your Dr. Evil jokes, so you get freaking sharks with freaking laser beams on their freaking heads. But it's really, it's not funny. Like, I laugh, but it's not funny because it's indicative of the mindset of the person who, at this point, is completely running immigration policy with the help of Stephen Miller, who, I mean, I don't know if I would exactly say Trump is a white supremacist. I think I would feel pretty comfortable saying that Stephen Miller is a white supremacist. So, yeah. So you add that, plus Trump's usual just say what the fuck ever dumb idea comes into his head, but he's the president of the United States. So, like I said, it was actually reported that somebody had to actually draw up, like, a cost estimate on this moat. Because he's the president, and he asked for one. And that's what we're dealing with. That's why covering immigration is so mind-meltingly difficult and frustrating and just emotionally draining sometimes. But it's something that we have to keep an eye on because this is important. It's important shit. I mean, I know it's not as fun as covering Trump tweets or impeachment or what AOC did or that little Swedish girl, but Ultimately, this is way, way more important. They're going to have a way, way longer lasting effect, even after Trump is gone, than almost anything else he's doing. Like, basically, the two things that are going to have the longest lasting impact, no matter what happens to Trump, is what he is doing right now on immigration and on trade. Because you're breaking things that I don't know if you can ever put them back together again. Even if he's gone, even if he gets impeached, even if he gets voted out next year, even if he gets voted out in 2024, there's irreparable damage being done. And so that's why it's important to keep an eye on this. But one more story I want to cover before I leave off of immigration is the latest and greatest way that the Trump administration has come up with trying to screw with people who are trying to come here legally. And I want to preface this by saying this applies to people who are coming here legally, as in people who are applying for visas, not people that are showing up in the asylum program or the refugee program, because this does not apply to them. If you are applying for a visa in the United States, you will have to show that you either can get health insurance, private health insurance, within 30 days of being here, or that you have sufficient funds to cover what is being presented as reasonably foreseeable medical costs. Now, for everybody who hears that and says, well, that sounds logical, let's think about how insurance works in the United States. Say you're coming here even on a work visa, you already have a job lined up. Okay, that's not to say that you're going to get insurance on day one. Like most employers have waiting periods far beyond 30 days for you to be eligible for insurance. I mean, some employers do it only a couple times a year when you have open enrollment. Some employers make you wait 60 days. Some make you wait 90. Some make you wait 6 months. So obviously, even if you have that lined up, it's not a guarantee that you are going to be able to have health insurance within the first 30 days of you being here. Which then brings us to having the funds on hand to cover quote-unquote foreseeable, reasonable medical cost. Okay, how much money is that? Is that $1,000? Is it $5,000? Is it $10,000? Is it $50,000? What is a reasonably foreseeable medical cost? Is it just like a routine checkup? Is it if you break your arm? Is it if you get into a car accident? Like, what dollar amount do you put on that? And it has not been announced what that dollar amount is. And I imagine it's going to be fairly high because of healthcare costs in this country. And that's a whole nother conversation that can be had here too. The combination of what it costs to actually pay for things out of pocket in this country, and also the difficulty of getting insurance in this country, because usually when you do it, you have to do it through an employer, or you do it through your spouse because they have insurance. It's very hard to get private insurance in this country, and it's very, very expensive. So you're basically setting up this system where unless you are already of a certain tax bracket, or you already have insurance, and again, I don't know how this would work with portability, because even if you have, say, I'm not sure, say, if you want to come here, well, I mean, even if you left a country that has nationalized healthcare, I don't think that's portable. Like, you couldn't bring it here. I would think you would still have to get private, or at least private insurance here. So I don't know how that would work. Like, I would assume you would just have to have like a huge amount of money on hand to meet the criteria of being able to pay for foreseeable medical costs. So again, you're screwing over poor people or even middle-class people who want to legally immigrate to the United States because you're not going to be able to meet this criteria. And another whammy on this is if you get here and you want to apply for insurance and you want to do it through the Obamacare exchanges, guess what? Not only does that not count as insurance under this plan, now you're also running afoul of the new public charge rule, because if you're getting subsidized health care, that's going to count against your cap for how much public assistance you can get before we decide, well, nope, sorry, you're a public charge, and so you can't become a citizen. It's just new and exciting and innovative ways to fuck over people who want to immigrate to the U.S. legally, which, again, I know I keep saying it, but I'll point it out again. If you don't let people do something legally, they're going to do it illegally. And prohibition doesn't work. Making things ridiculously difficult doesn't work. That doesn't stop a thing from happening. It just makes the thing harder or more dangerous or more expensive, but it doesn't stop the thing from happening. Like, we can figure this out with almost everything else, but not this. Not immigration, apparently. Apparently, we can't figure that out. So, anyway, that brings us to the end of all the immigration news that has happened. Yeah, that was a lot. So, yeah. And obviously, it sucks, and the cruelty is the point. I mean, at this point, I don't know anybody that could really argue anything other than that this administration is legit trying to shut down immigration into the United States, both legally and illegally. Which, I mean, you're never going to shut down illegal immigration. Like I said, prohibition doesn't work. We all know this. Every libertarian should know this. So, what should be happening is figuring out ways to expand legal immigration and to be able to get these people into the country legally so that they can work legally. You can pay taxes. I know. Stay with me. You can pay your taxes. You can be a member of society. You can get all of the things that entails, and not this ridiculous bullshit that we're doing right now, because this isn't going to fix anything. This isn't helping anything. This isn't anything that is going to make this country better or safer or anything of the sort. So I really wish, once again, that somebody would be willing to have a serious immigration conversation at the federal level, but obviously that's not going to happen. And especially with now we have impeachment palooza, it's really, really not going to happen. So I'm sure I will continue to be tortured by having immigration stories put on my timeline that just make me sad and angry and infuriated until such a day as Trump is gone one way or the other, and then we will somehow have to figure out a way to fix the absolute mess we've made of immigration policy in this country. So, at this point, I will go ahead and wrap this up. And if you did make it this far, thank you as always. And if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. And I also now have a Patreon. I will put the link in the show notes. If you are so interested, go ahead, become a Patreon. You do get early access to my podcast episodes, and hopefully in the future, as time permits, I will have more and better things for you, but it's there now. You can go check it out. You can subscribe or not, it's up to you. It's a free country. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but so, as always, take care, and until next time.